Long before the printing press or parchment became common in the north, the Vikings and their ancestors used a striking system of angular symbols carved into wood, stone, bone, and metal. These were the runes more than just letters. They were carriers of meaning, history, and perhaps even magic. To decode them, one must first understand where they came from and why they looked the way they did. The most widely accepted theory traces the runic alphabet, known as the futhark, to contact between Germanic tribes and the Mediterranean world. Around the 1st century CE, northern traders and warriors encountered Latin and possibly Etruscan or Greek scripts. Over time, these influences blended with local innovation, producing characters adapted for carving rather than writing on smooth surfaces. Straight lines replaced curves, making them easier to cut into hard materials with knives or chisels. The earliest runic inscriptions appear on small personal items, combs, brooches, spearheads. These were not lengthy texts, but single words or names, marking ownership or perhaps invoking protection. By the Viking Age, the runes had evolved into the younger futhark, a streamlined set of 16 characters, replacing the older 24. This was a curious reduction, as spoken Norse still had many sounds. Some runes now had to represent multiple phonetic values, adding layers of ambiguity to their use. For the Vikings, writing with runes was not an everyday activity. Most communication remained oral, carried by skalds, traders, and storytellers. Runes were reserved for when permanence was desired, memorial stones for the dead, dedications to the gods, boundary markers, and talismans. A rune carved into a sword could claim victory in battle. Etched into a piece of driftwood, it could curse an enemy. The symbols were believed to hold inherent power, tied to the myth of Odin himself. According to Norse tradition, Odin hung for 9 nights upon the world tree, Yggdrasil, wounded and alone, without food or drink. In this state of sacrifice, he gazed into the depths of existence and discovered the runes not invented, but revealed. They were part of the cosmic order, a hidden language of the universe. This origin story infused the runes with an aura of sacred mystery. To carve them was to touch a fragment of divine knowledge. Archaeologists have found that runic inscriptions were not limited to Scandinavia. Viking expeditions carried them far beyond their homelands, across the British Isles, into the heart of modern Russia, even as far as Constantinople. In each place, they were adapted to local needs. Sometimes they recorded a brief boast. Thorstein raised this stone after his brother. Other times they acted as coded messages, intelligible only to those initiated in their meaning. The shapes of the runes themselves evoke a sense of ancient order. Each had a name, often tied to natural or mythic elements. Fehu for cattle and wealth, Raido for the journey, Tiwaz for the god of justice. The Vikings saw these not merely as phonetic symbols, but as concepts, each with its own symbolic weight. A single rune could operate on multiple levels: sound, word, idea, and magical force. Decoding Viking runes is therefore not just about translation. It requires grasping the interplay of language, belief, and craft. Each inscription is a frozen moment, a message carved to outlast the voice that spoke it. To read one is to look across centuries, into a world where every cut of the chisel carried intent and power. The runic alphabet takes its name from its first 6 letters: F, U, T, 8, A, R, and K. This sequence, known as the futhark, is the framework upon which the rest of the runes are arranged. In the Viking Age, the most common form was the younger futhark, a set of 16 symbols divided into 3 groups called atir. Each at had its own name and may have been associated with certain deities, functions, or symbolic meanings. The first at, beginning with fehu, represented themes of wealth, movement, and growth. The second began with hagalas, tied to challenges, fate, and transformation. The third started with tiwaz, a rune linked to law, honor, and victory. This organization was more than a mnemonic device. It reflected a worldview in which the order of the runes mirrored the rhythms of life. One of the striking features of the younger futhark is its compression of sounds. The Old Norse language had more phonemes than the alphabet could neatly represent, forcing certain runes to cover multiple sounds. This meant context was crucial when interpreting inscriptions. For example, the rune is could stand for both the vowel I and the consonant j, depending on its placement and neighboring symbols. This ambiguity left room for layered meanings, deliberate or otherwise. Beyond their role in recording language, each rune had a symbolic identity that existed independently of its phonetic value. These symbolic meanings were deeply rooted in the natural world, mythology, and daily life. Fehu signified cattle, the measure of wealth in early Norse society, but also carried the idea of mobility and the dangers of greed. Rido was the ride, the journey, evoking not only travel, but also the broader idea of life's passage. Algiz, shaped like an antler or a man with outstretched arms, stood for protection and connection to higher powers. Inscriptions often reveal that the Vikings were fully aware of these dual roles. A memorial stone might use the rune Tiwaz not only to spell a name, but to subtly invoke justice or divine favor. A charm, carved into a piece of wood, could carry a string of runes whose combined symbolic meanings formed a hidden spell, even if the words themselves seemed mundane. The runes were also flexible in their arrangement. They could be written left to right to left, or in boustrophedon style, where the direction alternated each line. In some cases, the same rune was repeated multiple times to emphasize its power. Bind runes, two or more runes merged into a single symbol, were another common technique, allowing the carver to compress complex messages or conceal sacred formulas from casual readers. Runestones, perhaps the most famous medium for runes, stood as monumental public records. These towering slabs of granite or gneiss were often placed along roads or near gathering places, carved with the deeds of the living and memorials for the dead. The text was sometimes accompanied by intricate animal and knotwork designs, suggesting that reading runes was meant to be both an intellectual and a visual experience. The arrangement of symbols within the stone's decorative borders often reflected careful planning, with the flow of the text guiding the eye like a journey. Some inscriptions hint at playful uses of the script. In Denmark, a stone carries the message, Gunvalder carved these runes, followed by a string of meaningless characters, possibly a form of coded joke or a test to confuse those who could not read. Other carvings, particularly on personal items, seem to blend practical information with hidden wishes, an owner's name intertwined with symbols for protection or good fortune. Understanding the structure of the futhark is key to unlocking the complexity of Viking runes. It was not a static, rigid code, but a living, adaptable system. Its 16 characters could convey direct speech, layered symbolism, or even cryptic puzzles, depending on the skill and intent of the carver. Each line cut into stone or wood was more than writing. It was an act of meaning-making that balanced the visible with the unseen. In the Viking worldview, the runes were more than a tool for recording history. They were threads in the fabric of fate itself. To carve them was to participate in the same mystery Odin uncovered on the world tree. This belief gave rise to their role in magic and ritual, where each symbol could channel unseen forces into the physical world. The sagas and Eddic poems are filled with hints of runic magic. Warriors were said to inscribe runes onto their weapons to ensure victory. Farmers might carve protective symbols onto door frames or tools to guard against misfortune. Sailors etched them into the timbers of ships to call favorable winds or keep storms at bay. The runes could bless, curse, heal, or harm, depending on the carver's intent. One of the most intriguing uses was Galdr, a form of incantation or chanting in which runes were spoken aloud. The sound of their names was believed to awaken their power, making the act of writing and speaking them a combined ritual. A carved talisman might only reach its full strength when its runes were recited in the correct order, sometimes accompanied by offerings or symbolic acts. Bind runes played a prominent role in magical practice. By combining multiple runes into a single complex design, a practitioner could compress layers of meaning, weaving together multiple intentions, protection, victory, love, into one form. This also helped conceal the purpose from uninitiated eyes. Some bind runes were personal seals, unique to their owner, serving both as a magical signature and a mark of identity. Despite their mystical aura, not all runic magic was grand or solemn. Archaeological finds show playful, and even romantic, uses love charms, playful curses, and competitive boasts. A carved stick from Bergen bears the inscription, "I love the one who carved these runes," perhaps left as a flirtatious message centuries before the first love letter. The Christianization of Scandinavia in the late Viking Age brought a slow decline in the everyday use of runes. Latin script became dominant for official records, church inscriptions, and correspondence. Yet the runes did not vanish overnight. For centuries, they lingered in rural communities, scratched onto everyday objects, and used for folk magic. Even as their original meanings faded, they retained an association with secrecy and ancient wisdom. In the modern era, runes have been revived in multiple contexts. Archaeologists and linguists study them to better understand the language and culture of the Norse. Artists and craftspeople incorporate them into jewelry, tattoos, and design, celebrating their bold, timeless shapes. In some neo-pagan traditions, runes are once again used for divination, with each symbol carrying its ancient name and lore into the present. The fascination lies not only in their beauty, but in their layered nature. They stand at the intersection of art, language, and belief, a script that could record a king's deeds or whisper a private wish. Each rune is a reminder that writing is never just about words. It is about the power we give to symbols and the stories we choose to carve into the world. Even after 1,000 years, the cut of a rune across stone or wood still commands attention. It draws the eye, invites the mind to wonder, and carries with it an echo of the voices that once spoke through it. The language of the Vikings may be silent now, but the runes remain marks of a people who believed that every line, every stroke, could touch both the mortal and the divine.